Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
It's Dr. Mike Patterson, your host of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and how to build a great team. In most of our episodes, we talk about building leaders and teams in the workplace through various learning initiatives, coaching, skills building, relationship building. But today, we're going to turn back the clock and go to a point before people join the workplace. We're going to explore the tremendous opportunity that exists to begin this process of development of our talent pool when they are undergraduates. We're going to talk about building relational skills, collaboration, communication, teamwork skills in the undergraduate classroom. And my guest today is really an expert on that. I think he's been on the forefront of this work. It's Dr. Pete Gleason. Pete is a psychologist, an educator, and a speaker who is dedicated to helping people discover their personal worth and potential power through collaborative influence. He's a licensed clinical psychologist, so he sees patients, but he also teaches in the psychology programs at Thomas College's School of Arts and Sciences. And Thomas College is in the great state of Maine, where he just told me he is buried in snow right now. So spring is coming, Pete. Hold on. He's also an enthusiastic conference speaker. He began his academic career as an educator at Loma Linda University, teaching doctoral courses on behavioral health and administrative leadership. Loma Linda is near me here in Southern California. He has partnered with global talent development leader Core Strengths to integrate professional interpersonal skills into higher education. And that's kind of where I came into contact with Pete. More recently, Pete was a tenured professor of psychology at Walla Walla University in the Northwest, and he continued his work integrating professional interpersonal skills into the academic curricula, bringing his ideas to conferences like the Association for Talent Development, where he gave a very powerful talk called Never Too Early: Designing Soft Skills Courses in Higher Ed, where he shared challenges and successes associated with his work. Pete's greatest accomplishments, perhaps, are the fact that he has a beautiful wife, Janine, and a son, Sam, and they enjoy family life and playing in the great outdoors in the state of Maine. So, Pete, how is that for an introduction? Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast.
Mike, thank you so much for having me first. I feel, I want to say I feel very humble for the invitation, but hearing myself introduced, my ego is a little puffed up. That was quite the introduction. I sound quite fancy.
Yeah, you're pretty important guy, Pete. So
I'm a pretty big deal.
Let's transfer some of those big deal ideas to our audience. So you teach undergraduates, and I'm thinking back to my life as an undergraduate many years ago and what that experience was like. And I don't recall any professors really investing in my ability to communicate, collaborate, work through conflict. It was all about the academic discipline. The class I had signed up for, it was about delivering information. It was about passing the test and writing the papers. I just don't remember that kind of investment in me as an undergrad. But you believe this kind of training is important enough to include in the undergraduate experience. Why is that? Why do you feel so strongly about that?
Well, first, I completely agree. Reflecting on my own undergraduate experience, you take like your college writing type course where you learn how to, the skills you need to exist in college, writing papers, managing schedules, perhaps, things like that. But there's no kind of basic college education on, how do you interact with other people? How do you deal with conflicts that are going to come up with your roommate or, your coach or your your mentor, kind of the life skills. We kind of my reflection is that we kind of just assume students are going to learn these skills some magical place, so we don't explicitly teach them. Again, I have a PhD, like you mentioned, which means that I've been in school my whole life, essentially, as a student, and then I became a teacher. So now I'm on the other side. But either way, I've been existing in the classroom forever. So I do feel like that set me up to kind of see this from both sides, the academic side, the teacher side, and excuse me, and then also from the student side. And now as a teacher, we talk about our students, and one of the issues we have is there's a significant dropout rate of students who come to college for the first time and they're not ready. They're not ready to deal with the interpersonal conflicts that come up. They're not ready to deal with the struggle that comes up, like when you're struggling in your classes and you don't have a lot of friends, and you're not getting along with maybe your teachers, maybe other people. You're just not ready for all the complications that interpersonal challenges that come with being on your own. For a lot of people, going to college is your first time being on your own. So people end up failing out of college, not because they can't handle it academically, but they're not ready interpersonally. And then colleges, in my experience, neglect the training of these skills. So we're not really helping people to overcome the challenges they're not ready for. But then again, no one taught us these skills. So it's like we're not really thinking about passing these skills on to others because no one taught us.
Pete, you prompted something in me with what you just said. There is a business case for building these coping skills, interpersonal skills in students, because with the great demographic shift that's happening, being a part-time person in higher ed, I know that student retention is critically important. Recruitment is critically important. Some smaller institutions and institutions of higher ed overall may be in big trouble if they continue to lose students, and the demographics just are driving us that way. Do you agree? Is there a business case from the perspective of administrators to help students learn how to stick it out and hang in there and work well with their classmates and professors?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've perhaps unsuccessfully, but I've tried to argue this case that students, every school is going to have a percentage of students who leave the school within like their first quarter, their first semester, or their first year for different reasons. Maybe academically, maybe they realize college is not a priority. But there is that group of students who, they go to college and, they won't come out of their dorm room because they're having anxieties and struggles, and they don't have the skills, the interpersonal skills. And, if you think about the dollars comparison of a student who drops out after half a year versus if we had given them the skills to succeed and that student turned into a 4-year student, from a dollars and cents perspective, that's 4 years of tuition versus half a year of tuition. That's a big difference.
It's huge
in monetary change. Yeah, absolutely. Plus, and that's the business perspective. Plus, though, there's a student who went to college and left, and now maybe feels like they couldn't handle college, versus that same student was helped, and now they have a degree. And how much more empowered are they going to be to make life choices after they've earned their degree? So yes, we can make money and help students at the same time.
Yeah, that is a absolute great way to think about this. We are, as educators, especially you, Pete, interacting with students, traditional students at 18, 19, 20 years old. That's a life inflection point. There's so much growth that happens, and the whole trajectory of a young person's life is affected by that relatively brief period. So I think this is a critically important issue. Do you
Agreed.
think, based on your observations and interacting with students on a regular basis, are students less prepared for social interactions than they might have been in the past? And this is my hypothesis, maybe I'm all wrong on this, but they spend so much time on social media interacting with each other via text, it's video games, there's less and less. And then on top of it all, the last couple of years, we've been dealing with the isolation of online learning in high schools and the pandemic and all the things that are made life difficult for us for the last 2 years. Our students we figured it out through osmosis because we were thrown together in communities and we somehow figured it out, worked through things. But are students now not even in communities so that they can figure this stuff out?
I think there's a large number of students who are facing the exact challenges you're describing. Maybe the last 2 years, 1 or 2 years of their high school, they did virtually. So you're going into college with even less social experience. You go into college and there's perhaps more confusion, more uncertainty, because college, maybe classes are online, maybe they're in person. You don't know how, depending on health. And I feel like the norm, the bottom line norm of education is very different and uncertain right now. So you have students coming in with an unstable footing into the educational experience. So that's definitely part of it. To your overall question about, do students maybe are they less socially prepared now than they used to be? One idea that comes to my mind is there are conversations within the world of mental health about social media and screen time and how it's maybe negatively affecting people's ability to connect with each other. And they've been voiced, pretty severe fears that, people in general, not just kids and young people, but everyone are gonna, as we spend more and more time online, if we spend more and more time looking at screens and less time sitting with people and connecting with people, we're going to lose those skills. So perhaps the challenge that we have right now with thinking about college students being introduced to those skills, maybe this is even like a jump off point to, in the future, there's going to be maybe even more populations that need to be introduced to these skills if we don't learn them organically from interactions, because we're so addicted to our screens. Where are we going to learn these skills?
Pete, you've made some strong points. So it makes me wonder, why is the academic community so behind in their valuation of interpersonal skills?
Okay.
The need is there, but the system and the programs, the process that's in place now seems not to be ready to develop these skills. What do you think about that?
Again, as being involved with education in one way or another forever, my observation is education is very slow to change. And that is probably not a huge thundering statement to make. It might be obvious to a lot of people. But for example, I taught at a school where the core curriculum, I said, just to be clear, I taught, so I'm not describing any particular school, certainly not my current school, because anyway, the school had a core curriculum, and part of the core was dedicated to giving students the skills they need to succeed. And this was included things like college writing, so writing skills, which obviously students need to know how to write to do well in college. But this class with the curriculum was 30 years old. So think about how much different skills you need to succeed than 30 years ago. Think about like social media, the internet, computers. How do you communicate? How do you express yourself? How different the world is now than it was 30 years ago. And we're still teaching our students the way we were taught 30 years ago. And we don't see how the world has changed and how the needs of the students have changed. and that really is holding us back. Because like you said it's obvious that students need these skills, but I think to a lot of people it's not obvious because it's not something we were ever taught. So it's never occurred to us teachers to teach it to others.
Well, I hope, Pete, you are not a voice crying out in the wilderness, but you do seem to be on the cutting edge of this important movement. So tell us a little bit about what it looks like to bring academic and the professional worlds together in terms of valuing and teaching interpersonal skills. What have you done in that regard? What are you doing, and what's your vision for the future?
Sure. So I was teaching at Loma Linda University. I was co-teaching a doctorate level course on healthcare administration, leadership and healthcare administration. So while I was teaching this course, we were using several different tools and assessments to help build our students' awareness of themselves and their strengths, and the strengths they're going to bring into whatever leadership positions they find themselves in. And I was introduced to one particular assessment that I became a big fan of. That's the core strengths assessment and curriculum. So what we did was I decided to become a facilitator with that, so that I could bring that the core strengths conversation and curriculum into our classroom, into our activities over the course of the school year. What happened was at the end of that, students actually responded very strongly to those kind of interpersonal conversations that come with that whole core strengths, set of conversations and ideas. Students loved it. So we started doing it more and more. And I actually, in addition to teaching some of those doctorate classes, I was teaching some of the younger master level classes. Younger meaning students in the master's program were typically younger than in the doctorate program. And the master's program was larger. So we had struggles with thinking about how do you bring some of these training conversations into a larger classroom. But we made some adaptations and found the same results in that the students were very excited and passionate about the conversations we were having. One moment that I think has been a big motivator for me was at the end of the year, after we had worked with the master's students, one of my students, this big, strong, guy who, obviously goes to the gym. He cares. He makes a striking presentation.
Much like me, right, Pete?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, kind of like your shadow. Yeah, yes, exactly, Mike. So anyway, he was reflecting with me about the conversations he had been having in the class with regards to the interpersonal skills and how he had changed over the course of the year. And while we were having the conversation, he began tearing up and crying and having this very powerful cathartic moment, reflecting on how much more powerful he felt, how much more enabled he was to express himself, to connect with and work effectively with other people. He just felt so much more potential, like he knew who he was and what he could do, which is exactly, as a teacher, this is the exact kind of realization we want our students to have, but we don't often know if our students get there. But this young man, he got there, and it was because of our interpersonal conversation. So that inspired me to say, all right, if we're having these powerful moments, I want all my students to have these powerful moments. So from there, I just started thinking about how can I get as many students as possible to have these insights about themselves and how they can be their most effective selves. So what I eventually did, I actually, working with people from core strengths, you in particular, Mike, I took that talent development curriculum and massaged it into an academic. I took it from a 6-hour training to an entire 10-week academic course. I added and embellished and elaborated, but it became a course at my school that I taught at the time that was very popular. Students loved it. Got all the same kind of positive feedbacks about how much more empowered people felt. One student, let's see. One thing that I find whenever students take this, no matter what age, they always tell me they wish they had done it earlier. Like I've worked with senior, administrative leaders who tell me they wish they had done it earlier in their career. I've done it with young professionals who feel like they wish they had these conversations in college. I've worked with college seniors who feel like they wish they had done it their first year in college before they made all of their like decisions about majors and things like that. So I feel like one, it's a powerful conversation to have. Two, students really value and get excited about things that they really see are going to benefit them. And I feel like students don't always get excited about their college education. They're not excited about every class because maybe they can't always see how this particular class they're taking is going to benefit them. But when they can see that connection, things get exciting really fast. And I feel, based on my experience, that students learning about how they can connect more effectively with others, how they can build relationships, how they can understand themselves is exciting, and they want to do it. And I think I have a lot of, all my anecdotal evidence about students valuing experiences like this. But I really have become a strong believer that not only is this kind of a conversation interesting to students, but it adds so much value to their overall college experience. What they walk away from, the knowledge about who they are, how to have a voice, how to be heard. What's the point of an education if you graduate and then you leave college, but you've never found your voice? How are you going to connect with people? How are people going to hear what you have to say if you don't know how to connect? Yeah.
Pete, what are some examples of some of the assignments that you gave to your students? You mentioned that you designed an entire course around developing skills related to collaboration, more effective communication. What are some examples of assignments that you created that are different than the traditional academic assignment that most professors might assign and want their students to work on? How did you get people to roll up their sleeves and jump into this?
Okay. So one example to try to get students to see how they were learning ideas and insights that could guide them in working with other people and making valuable connections. So part of the curriculum, we were learning about the different kinds of strengths that are available to people and how some people will they'll be attracted to some behaviors more than others. And we have different motivations for why we do what we do. And we talk about how to recognize your motivations, but then also recognizing other people have different motivations and how to bridge those gaps when we got to work together effectively. So one activity that I did actually to try to make this useful, I actually invited the university president to the classroom, surprised the students with that. I asked the president if he would be willing to just answer some questions from the students. And he was very gracious and said, yeah. So the challenge to the students was I wanted them to just converse with the president, ask whatever questions they had, but the challenge to them was to try to figure out the president's motivational style and the president's behavioral preferences. So they were kind of challenged with seeing if what we've been talking about in class would be enough information for them to talk to this important other person enough that they could realize they had what it took to make an effective connection with someone like this. And that was actually a surprise activity that students for years after that class, they would still stop me in the halls and tell me about. They remembered that activity. And they actually felt like they were able to learn so much more about the president and who he was from that one class period than from any of the talks and the presentations he had done, because he'd been brave and allowed himself to be more vulnerable. He had allowed students to make a connection with him. And that was very meaningful to the students, because that's, again, you don't always get the opportunity or see the opportunity to connect with other people. So I think it really began showing students the value of the relationship with any other person, and the value that, the experiences that can come from taking the time to maybe make a connection where there wouldn't otherwise be a connection, or maybe there wouldn't normally be a connection between a freshman and a university president. But if you can make that connection, that changes the experience. Yeah.
We use this expression in this work that I do, that you do, Pete, and it's called developing relationship intelligence. And relationship intelligence is insight that we can use to adjust our approach to get better, improved outcomes with the different types of people we interact with. We know that one size doesn't fit all, but if we make the proper adjustments, we can work better with the people we need to work with. And this activity you described with the president seems to be exactly a way to explore that idea and understand it. I'm also thinking, based on what you just described with this activity, hopefully the students were recognizing their ability to transfer that experience, those insights they gained, to a future workplace experience when they're interacting with their manager or the president of their company or another senior executive or an important client or a key colleague, key coworker. So tell us a little bit about what you have found in terms of preparing students for the job market. Is the university system as it now exists in most places really doing a great job preparing students for what they need in the job market, maybe to get a job or to thrive in the workplace? And how is this work you're doing benefiting them in that regard?
Okay, there's a few questions in there. I'll try to keep them all in my head. The first question was about maybe what did we do to help bridge the gap within our class between that activity with the president, for example, and future work. So what I did with my course was we built over the quarter to kind of this crescendo of putting all of our relationship intelligence together in creating effective communications with other people. Getting people's attention, coming to agreements on important things, working well with others in practice effectively. So, for example, again, I brought the president to the class. We talked about that. Later on that quarter, we had a kind of a follow-up assignment where, now that we had an understanding of the president and the president's values, strengths, the follow-up assignment was put what we know about the president together to write an important email to the president. Like, I gave him a challenge. I don't remember the exact scenario, but let's say you had to write a letter to the president. We had to convince the president to do something that is important to us. How can we leverage everything we know about this person to write and interact effectively, to communicate effectively with this person? So it was just a massive application of everything we've been building towards with, a real life person and, stakes there, and meaning it was a topic that was important to people. So that again, hopefully got the students to begin thinking we can really use these skills to work with people when it matters. So to your question, Mike, about college and how are we preparing students for the workplace, there's evidence from the professional realm that employers are looking for, what we call soft skills or interpersonal skills. There's research that's been out in the last couple of years from employers saying that they would rather have new employees with soft skills. And, if they had to choose between soft skills and technical skills, they'd rather have employees with soft skills who knew how to interact and work well with each other, because employers can, if they have to, they can train technical skills, but it's much harder to train soft skills. And again, colleges, we're not specifically teaching soft skills. We kind of just assume that when you work in your classes and whatever, you go through your college experience, you're going to magically learn soft skills. And maybe for the most part we do, but not everyone does. And not all of us do as well as we could. So to that point, I would say there's significant room for improvement. So we want our students to have not just soft skills, but like maximal soft skills. Employers, I think that our students will be much more competitive in the marketplace and more comfortable in the marketplace and have more longevity in the marketplace if they feel like they can connect with others, they can connect with their boss, their coworkers. I think it's nothing new now, the idea that people quit their boss, they quit their job because of people, not because of the tasks of the job. Turnover is expensive. Employees losing interest in their job. It's hugely expensive to the company, but it's also disruptive to people's lives. So I think there's a lot of good that we could do if we help people go into a job they're passionate about, but also be able to build an equilibrium, a social environment within that job where, they're as equally excited about the people as they are about the job itself. I mean, I think that's the best case scenario.
Because success in any endeavor often boils down to your ability to relate to others, to build productive relationships. I think it was President Teddy Roosevelt who said the single most important ingredient in the formula of success is being able to get along with others. And Pete, you're doing that for your students. You're helping your students develop those skills. One of the things we always try to do here in the podcast, the Mission First People Always podcast, is give our listeners something practical that they can do. And I know we've talked about what you're doing in an undergraduate or an academic environment, and probably most of our listeners aren't there anymore. But what's one thing that you would encourage them to do in their own work and lives that would be positive and developmental for them?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And I think there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. But given the context of what we've been talking about and the idea that, it may well become harder and harder to connect with others, perhaps one thing that each of us could do to make this environment a little bit more effective relationally is just think about what is it about us that makes it easy or hard for others to connect with us. Maybe I think a big thing we have in college and in life is busyness. A lot of us, we get very busy, and the busier we are, the harder time we're going to have connecting with other people. We're not going to, we may not see other people in that connection as a priority. But, and I don't want to pick on busyness, but I do think if we were all just a little bit more mindful of the challenges that other people face when they want to connect with us, if we could be more mindful of this, perhaps we could just facilitate an environment where we're maybe better. If we make life easier for other people who want to connect with us, I think we would all be the stronger for it.
Amen. I like that. Pete, how do my listeners get in touch with you just to keep track of what you're up to, what you're doing? How can they reach you?
I think probably the easiest way would be on Twitter. I try to be hip and cool to keep up with my students. But on Twitter, you can find me at Pete Gleason, Ph.D. That's the easy. I'm on LinkedIn and some other things, but I think Twitter is just the easiest touch point there.
So, Pete, thank you so much for being on the Mission First People Always Great Leaders, Great Teams podcast. You've given us some things to think about. I think those of us who have college-aged students would love for them to encounter a professor like you or several professors like you. Those of us who maybe had our college experience many decades ago, look back and think of some ways that we might have developed ourselves better for the workplace, but we're all on a journey. We're all working to get better. I know you work with people in your clinical practice who are working on some things. You're working with your students. The good news is every day is an opportunity to improve ourselves, get a little bit better. And I appreciate what you're doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this episode. Until next time, when we have another conversation with an interesting thought leader, I wish you well and blessings on your week. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.